Hi, my name is Timothy Strykowitz, and I will be teaching you guys how to use Excel to format an income statement, which is an accounting financial statement, which I'll explain a little bit more in detail, as well as how to use the sum function in Excel to sum up the numbers that are important and that you're looking for. So I already started with a basic layout here. It's obviously kind of messy, but I just wanted to show a general income statement that has not been formatted yet, and then I want to go into how to explain to format that. So this is the basics of an income statement. At the top, you want to have just the general title, which is income statement. And usually you have a company's name, but in this case, I just decided to just put income statement and get rid of the company's name. And then you want to have the year and the ending of the period that you are doing the financial statement for. So that's just why I put for year ending. And then I just did all the way till the end of 2016. And then how an income statement works is it basically explains what the company did throughout an entire period. So it gives the sales revenue, which is how much money the company makes based on what it sells. And then next in line is the cost of goods sold, which is the amount of money that went into selling those units. So such as inventory costs and labor costs per unit, if that makes sense. And then gross profit, which I'm going to have to show the number or show the formula how to use the sum in order to show what gross profit is. But essentially, it's just the amount of profit that a company made before counting all the other expenses. Next on the income statement is the operating expenses, which include advertising expenses, office supplies expenses, just general expenses that a company accrues throughout a year. So I just had, like I said, advertising, office, salary, rent, utilities, and then you want to total that at the end, and I'll explain how to use that sum function again to get the total operating expenses for the period. Next on the income statement is the non-operating expenses. So for example, the interest expense, an interest expense is something like if the company took out a loan in order to start up the business, it has to pay interest on that loan. So then that's just the expense, and usually it's drawn out throughout multiple years. So that this would be $1,250 for just that year, and usually that's an expense that occurs every year. And then tax expense is obviously an expense that they have to pay to the government in order to run a business, so just based on the amount of money that they made. And then I have the total non-operating expenses, which I will sum up for you guys. And then at the bottom is net income, which is basically just sales minus all of the costs, including the inventory, which is the cost of goods sold, and then all the different expenses that they did. So first I'm just going to explain the different formatting that you could do just to make it a little nicer. Up here in between the A and B cells, there's a little button that comes up. I don't know if you guys can see that. It has the two arrows. So what you want to do for that is just double click it. And that's the easiest way to space it all out so everything on this column will space out perfectly, like as far as the biggest thing on it. So this total non-operating expense is obviously the biggest one, which is why it goes all the way just to that end of that sentence or that word. And so now I think that already looks a lot better. You can read it, you can see the numbers a lot easier. Obviously, when I was going through them before, it was a little difficult to see, but I just wanted to give you a little quick run through on it. And then what I like to do is I just like to, bold the top of certain things, like bold the main topic. So what you can do for that is make sure you click the cell. So I click the income statement. You can tell because it's boxed in. Then you just can click the B up here, just like in Microsoft Word or anything you have used before, and it just bolds that statement. It just makes it easier. It's nice and bold, and you can tell what exactly it is you're looking at. And then another big topics include the operating expenses and the non-operating expenses. So I'm just going to go ahead and bold those as well, just to make it a little bit easier to read for the viewer. So like I just said, click the cell and then go to the top and click bold. And then the main thing on the income statement is obviously the net income. This is the bottom line. This is the sales minus all the expenses. So I'm definitely going to bold that as well. Next, another important thing that you guys want to do is notice that this is not in currency. It's just a number and it doesn't have a dollar sign or decimals or anything like that. And obviously for most accounts that doesn't really seem to make much sense because you're only working with money. So what you can do here is at the top here it says number. So that has a general number, currency, accounting, date, time, and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is just put into accounting settings. And then it'll give you that decimal point and the dollar sign, as well as break it up with the comma, which it just makes it look a lot neater. And what you can do, since I just did general numbers that don't have decimals, you can click this button up here and it'll get rid of those two decimals. So right up here, just click it twice. It decreases the number of decimal places, and there you go. And what you can do with this number now, in order to paint the rest of them to have the same exact format, meaning no decimal point but the dollar sign and the comma, is up here. There's a Format Painter button, which you can just go ahead and click with the cell that you're clicking that you want the rest of the other cells to look like. Go ahead and click that button and then drag down the other ones and release. And then it has them all the same format, all with the dollar sign and all with the comma. So now you guys are all ready to go, but the most important thing is figuring out the sum function. So obviously the sum is adding up the numbers in the cells to get a total. And what you can do for that is just type in the equal sign. And this is a general way to start a formula in Excel. Just go ahead and hit equal, and then you can have a bunch of Excel's formulas come up as long as you know them. And that's just the way to start a formula. So then after that, I'm going to go ahead and type sum. And then it'll come up as functions. If you've already used it before, it'll obviously come up as most recently used. But just the general one I want to use right here is sum. Go ahead and click that. And then it'll say number 1, number 2. This basically just means which numbers you want to sum up. So go ahead and click the 2. For the gross profit, notice how the $150,000 is negative because the cost of goods sold is a cost, so it's money that's going out of the profit. And then you can just go ahead and hit enter from there. Once the 2 are selected, B4 and B5, hit enter, and then it'll give you the $150,000 gross profit. Now that you sum those two up, you want to go down to the total operating expenses and go ahead and sum up those as well. So you just want to hit equal sum, and now that it'll be most recently used, you can go ahead and click that one. And then these ones are a lot longer. There's 5 numbers instead of 2. So just make sure you click the top one, that top cell up there, and then just drag down and then click enter again. And there you go. That's the total expenses. So an important part to know about this is up here, this cost of goods sold number does have the negative, and this one does not, because that's just how the income statement works. It is a positive number, but it is saying that that's the total amount of expenses. So that doesn't mean that you're getting $85,500. It means that that's just the total amount of expenses, and it has not been subtracted from this gross profit yet. Next, you're going to want to total up the non-operating expenses. You can go ahead and do it the same exact way. Equal sign, type in the sum. Go ahead and click that, and then drag for the 2 and hit enter. And then you'll get the total for the interest and tax expense, which are the non-operating items. So now that you guys have each section, it's very easy to calculate the total net income from there because you have the totals of both of them. Also, I just wanted to point out that this stayed in the same exact formatting as the ones above it because you were using the sum function. So that makes sure that it keeps that same number format, which is pretty interesting and very helpful. So like I said, these two numbers, the $85,500 and the $2,995, are both expenses. They're not negative because it's saying that it is an actual expense that has not been subtracted out from gross profit yet. So you want to make sure you realize that when you're calculating net income, because it's going to be the total amount of sales revenue minus the cost of goods sold minus all these expenses. Now the gross profit is what we can use to show what we've made so far. It already takes the cost of goods sold out of the sales revenue. So we can go ahead and start with that number. And this is going to sum up the total net income, which is going to be the gross profit here, minus the 2 main expenses. And then you'll get your net income. So what you can do for that, since you already have these numbers, it's just going to be a basic formula. Just go ahead and hit equal sign. That's going to start the formula for you. What you want to do is hit the $150,000. This is the gross profit. Like I said, it's the revenue minus the cost of goods sold that go into that revenue. And then you're going to want to subtract the next 2 main numbers because those are the costs. So you can just go ahead and hit the subtract sign on your keyboard. Click that first total operating expense one. And then so up at the top here, it'll have the B16, which is the gross profit, minus the operating expenses, B14. Make sure you're doing it right. And then you can hit the subtract sign again. Click that last button. Go ahead and hit enter for me. And then you have your total net income for the income statement. And that is how you format an income statement and then sum up the numbers using an Excel function, the sum Excel function. And then at the bottom, just a general easy equation with the equal sign and just subtracting the expenses from the total gross profit.